And good morning, everyone, my lovely little people, spark citizens of the world, making a massive impact with where you are today. This is Grant, and this is State of the Spark, where we ignite lives of explosive significance, starting with our own, where we uplift ourselves and encourage one another and take things to the next level. My friends, that is what we do. And I am so glad you're here with me celebrating a glorious, glorious Friday. Brock in the house. Good morning, Brock, man. I haven't seen you in a little while. I'm glad to see you this morning, sir, that you dropped by. Hey, Brock, we're going to be talking about SpaceX and its new competitor in town briefly. We're going to be talking about failure. We got to talk about failure. We have to talk about failure. Why? Because I want to lend to you a superpower of mine, and that is how Grant just never fails. Well, Grant, yeah, I saw that one time that you had this blow up and someone accused you. Good morning, Dory. Thank you for stopping by. Rut, thank you for the likes. Brock, thank you for the loves. Good morning, my beautiful people. I'm going to share with you how me and Marissa failed in the Dominican Republic so hard and how we never fail at anything. Grant, that's a paradox. You're totally right. Welcome to the show. Have you been here before? Life, my friends, has things that seem like paradoxes, but when they occur in the right time, it's a linear story of success. We're going to touch on a few quick things. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Brock. We're going to touch on a few quick things that I have as principles on how every time I hit something that my heart rate goes up and I get into the cold sweats and I know that I actually dropped the ball or I actually failed or I actually upset someone, what I go through on how that turns away, it does not drain our energy and turns into a massive success or just a standard success, maybe not a massive success, turns into a success every single time. And then Brock says, my sleep work schedule just cycled over to make it live. I feel you, man. He's probably up coding in the night. He might just be ending his work night or starting his work night. Who knows, man? I'm glad you're here with us. So we're going to cover that. We got a few pieces of other news. We're not going to take too long with other news. It's Friday. You guys got awesome things to get to today and this weekend. So I'm not going to drag out crazy other news, but we are going to start with Cup of Gratitude. So if you're with me this morning and you're watching, and you're one of the lovely people that we're doing this together, it would honor me. It really would. If you grab a cup and share in the comments what you're grateful for, because I am about to do the same. Let's do this. Okay. What I'm grateful for today, absolutely hands down, super pumped out of my mind for today. I'm pumped for my clients. I'm pumped that my clients are so freaking awesome. You see, this week, Marissa and I had the awesome opportunity to spend way more time with our clients. We spent time with our clients. We got back into their business a little bit, found out where they were at. And I'm speaking on the Spark Site side. I also had encounters with my coaching clients this week. All that kind of converged this week. And I got to hear from them and hear their heart and hear their life challenges, their personal challenges, hear where their businesses were at. And I just got so inspired from these encounters that today I am massively grateful for connecting with my awesome clients. You know, our clients are also solving our problems. And what I mean by that is we're niching a lot of the Spark services towards serving coaches and trainers. And we already have a ton of these clients. We have a ton of coaches and trainers. And as I encounter them, talking to them about their web presence and their marketing and their how do they set up their business systems, they also taught me a bit more about how we could serve the coaching clients better. One of our clients is also helping us find an additional customer service or another customer service specialist. Our clients are so awesome. And if you're not a client yet, you're going to be one day because we're friends and it's going to be awesome. We're going to lift each other up. That is what I'm grateful for today. What are you grateful for? Tell me in the comments, my super friends. It's the best way to start the day. Gratitude. Share, and you'll feel better that you did, just like I will after I have a sip of coffee. In other news, my super friends, the U.S. is now sadly and tragically shutting down the Arecibo Space Telescope. Yes, this was the space telescope whereby we searched for aliens in the universe for so long. There's other technologies helping us with that now all over the planet, all over our satellite field. And there's going to be more of these telescopes on the backside of the moon. We're going to learn a lot about our universe in coming years, and Arecibo might not be necessary, but it is tragic. For those who don't know, the Arecibo satellite is the humongous dish satellite in the rainforest. This is in Puerto Rico, by the way, and it has been featured in several films. Did you know that? Both in GoldenEye is one of the more famous ones, James Bond, as well as one of my favorite cameos by the Arecibo satellite. One of my favorite cameos that got me just so inspired when I was younger. The movie Contact. Yes, the Carl Sagan book. If you have not read this book by Carl Sagan, please, for the sake of all that is holy and alien, please read this book. It was phenomenally written, and it kind of idealized what a hypothetical encounter with a massively advanced species could look like. And it was an adventure to end all adventures. But yes, it also featured the Arecibo satellite in Puerto Rico, and it's going down. You see, one of its support cables slipped loose last month, and it knocked a huge hole in the dish itself. And that itself was challenging enough. So the group that maintains it rallied to try to fix it and put it together. And they were doing some engineering specs when, lo and behold, another huge support cable fell and knocked a 100-foot by 300-foot hole in the satellite. And sadly, yes, sadly, the report came back, the safety report came back and said it's just going to make more sense to decommission the thing. So they're actually going to put a deconstruction plan or destruction plan and disassemble the Arecibo satellite. You know, we probably need, Dan Sampson was on the show earlier or commented somewhere, we should probably have a RIP Arecibo t-shirt going along. I'm sure we could sell a ton of those. If someone could make that, we'll put it on the show. I'll wear it, RIP Arecibo, and we'll go make some money together, sadly. But here we go. Actually, here is a link for those who care about all things alien and discovery. Gina says, I am thankful. Gina says, I am thankful. Where are you at? For a full Thanksgiving schedule and my clients who trust me. This is super important that we're thankful. Thank you for sharing, Gina, for a full schedule. And you know what? A lot of us are hoping to take Thanksgiving off. Wonderful people like Gina Bullock make that possible for families and for families of furry friends so that they can take time, and she'll have a full schedule, pet sitting, pet walking, taking care of her awesome pets during Thanksgiving, and her clients who trust her. Thank you so much for sharing, Gina, what you're grateful for today. So let's get into other news number 2. So there's a new kid in town. A SpaceX competitor, Rocket Lab, finally hit a reusability. Hang on. There we go. A reusability milestone. And so, as we all know, SpaceX is the big kid on the block, and SpaceX is winning all kinds of accolades for what they're doing with reusable rocketry. But there are other companies, my friends. They're actually just opening up a whole new horizon, and there's maybe a dozen other companies trying. Rocket Lab is one of them. Rocket Lab just launched 30 satellites and recovered their reusable booster called, the name of this wonderful booster is called Return to Sender. And they're still way behind SpaceX. They're not really a direct competitor just because SpaceX is so far ahead in their technology. But Rocket Lab did succeed in sending up 30 satellites and recovering their rocket booster. And now they're breaking it down for their own proprietary technology to see how they could accelerate the process. They don't have to rebuild this thing from scratch. They're going to actually put it together and try to turn it around and launch. And that launches out of, I believe, it's New Zealand rocket base. So they're kind of on the other side of the planet. So that is rocket booster. Here we go. Return to Sender. Brock says he is grateful for health, resources, and relationships, especially customers, that allow him to maximize focus on solving complex problems for building software. That's Brock's gratitude. Thank you, Brock, for sharing. Gratitude feels so good when you just like, you know what, I'm grateful and I'm proud of my story. We're going to talk about story here in just a hot second. Our last piece of other news, my beautiful friends, is the show is going to be moving eventually one day, if I could get your comments and shares and likes happening, over at the State of the Spark Facebook page, stateofthespark.com. I'm just going to post over here, hey, yeah, we're over here. Boom. We're going to it's a slow migration right now. We've been doing a lot in the company and it hasn't been a high focus, but yes, we're still going to move to this location. So in our last piece of other news, make sure you join us over there. Brock says, yeah, the competitors are about 10 years behind SpaceX, but it's happening. And let me tell you something, every great shift in humanity can normally be centralized around. There's all kinds of inventions. There's all kinds of advances for our species. But you could pretty much go back in time and look at transportation innovation and anchor that as the pivot point and see a massive explosion. And right now, SpaceX is really making it possible. And its perceived competitors and all of the people working in the space field. This is a new land rush. If you picture Far and Away with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, if you can picture Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman riding their horses in the Oklahoma land grab, if you can picture that in space. Picture that is what we are doing in space. So let's see here. Looks like my connection's a little wavery. That's okay. So here we go. I want to tell you a quick little story about a friend. A friend's father, you don't know this person. They relayed a story to me recently. And this story, oh my gosh, he says we're missing an E in state of the spark. I'll have to see where we're missing an E there. State of the spark. I'll have to check to see where I'm missing an E. Brock says I'm missing an E. We'll go check that out. A friend recently told me a story about failure, and you should hear about this. You see, this friend is a good friend of ours, and 30 years ago, this friend's father thought they heard from God, still stands on the fact that they did hear from God. And God told them to write a book. And God said, if you sacrifice your life and write this book, I need this book written for the world, the body of Christ. If you sacrifice your life and write this book, if you do that, then I will reward you with millions of dollars. Have you heard a story like this before in your friends or in your family or in the world? Have you heard someone say, if you sacrifice this, then I'll give you this reward? Well, this friend's father actually did this. They spent years and years writing this book. And they were so committed to this vision. As commitment's good. They're so committed to this vision that actually the family fell apart. And the kids felt neglected. And they got this person who was writing this book, this author, received this feedback and says, you're losing touch here. You're losing touch with the world. You're losing touch with your family. You're losing touch with us. And this person then had to face this failure in his family and his failure in his kids. And he had a choice to learn a lesson. Well, what did this man do? No one bought the book. No millions came. He has an opportunity to learn a lesson. What lesson is this man going to learn? Well, I'll tell you, this man rallied and said, you all just don't understand the voice of God, was his response. You all just don't understand the voice of God, and therefore I don't care if I lose these relationships. And now the man has spent 30 years editing and re-editing this book, hoping that the rain dance, the bone shaking, will suddenly shake these millions this person was promised out of the sky from God. Are you learning the right lessons from your failures? Instead of learning the right lessons, this person went from a failure of his families and mishearing God. I'm not saying God doesn't speak. I'm not saying that he wasn't promised something, but this man had learned the wrong lesson. And for 30 years, he has heaped and compounded failures have become additional failures instead of becoming victories. Now I've got another man, similar story, but a little bit of different lesson that I know. And this man was a friend of mine in a similar coaching space as I was. And he had a vision for doing workshops. And he came up with this perfect brand and rallied the perfect speakers and did the marketing and put this event on. And that night, when everyone came together, the speakers' presentations were on point. The event was televised, which at the time, this is nearly 8 years ago now. At the time, hardly anyone was doing live streaming. And the people who attended were uplifted. And the speakers who took the time to shape their talks were uplifted. I myself was seeded with the idea of what was potential in Lakeland and in Central Florida and beyond for what was possible in personal development. But there were less than 25 people in the audience. And this man took this as failure. And I saw a seed of what could be for Spark, and this actually seeded Spark. And this person took this as a massive failure, exited coaching, and is an entirely different industry today. He perceived failure, and it turned him into stepping another direction entirely. He, I believe, at times is very unhappy. Now, is this person doing well? Yeah. In fact, both of these people are doing fine. They're getting by in life, and they would say that they're happy. But if I were to be transparent, I know them. I think that they might actually not always be as happy as they perceive. I believe that they have taken failure and has not necessarily become victory. I want to talk about failure and how failure can become victory very quickly. And what I do, you see, I get massive victories all the time. I get moderate victories all the time. And no matter what comes at me, I nearly always come out on top. And this conversation has come up a lot lately. From my clients, what failures are they facing? From my friends, what challenges are they facing? From myself in my own life, what are the ups and downs? And how can we pivot from failure to victory? I want to share a few core principles. As I was thinking about this and journaling about this, I wrote down and scribbled down a few things that I get accused of quite often. And you always do X. And what used to be a chiding, derogatory statement, you always do X, now is really viewed by myself and a lot of these people as a superpower on how my failures are always victories. Let me share a few of these, if I could, on what I do, both before I engage in an effort and after the effort, in order that I can actually achieve victory every single time. Here we go. Here's a few things. Number one, before I even get started, I check myself. And I ask myself, do I actually believe there is a way? If you want every failure to become a victory, you have to start with the right mindset. And the right mindset starts out believing there is already a way. Now, I don't mean just like cognitively I assent that someone has run the 4-minute mile. Someone has built a drone company before. Someone has built an app company before. Someone has built a massive training company before that has affected millions of people. Someone has done this. When you start a venture, you need to check yourself. Has someone ever done this before? And if that is true, then do I believe, here's step one or principle one, do I believe that there is a way for me to learn the way others have done this? Do I believe this viscerally? And I mean the feeling of belief. I don't mean mental assent. A lot of you can nod and go, yes, someone has done it before. But there's an unspoken end of that sentence. Yes, someone has done it before, comma, but I don't know if I can. I'm not talking about that BS. I'm holding you accountable. I'm holding your feet to the fire. I am talking about a belief that if someone has done it before, then I can learn how to do it too. And I am on a mission to learn this thing. You have to start from a framing of being convinced someone has done it before, or you can learn how, and you can learn how they did it, or you can learn the way. You have to be convinced at your goal before you get going. I just mean convinced. You don't have to know the way. You don't have to prove it. You have to be convinced of it. That is my starting place at all times. I really don't start things if I don't believe that. The trouble, as Marissa might call out, is that I believe that about a lot of things. The second thing is this. You have to also then, and this is before you even get started, you have to also enter into an experiment mind. You know, my experiments in high school about passing high school, I knew going into high school that my brain was all over the place. I was not interested in doing what everyone wanted me to do in high school. I knew that I had other desires. I knew that I was not liking how I saw the students living their lives. And so in high school in 9th grade, I went into it not having this language for it, but I went into it knowing that I was going to experiment with how to hack this thing. I didn't have the word hack. I didn't know I was experimenting. I just knew I wanted a different way of living, but I kind of had to go through the threshold of high school. So I experimented with a lot of things. Rut says, I don't care if someone has done it or not, but I'm doing it or not. That's what matters to me. So Rut, I love it. I don't care if someone has done it or not, but I'm doing it or not. And that's what matters to me. And I appreciate that, Rut. And that is a framework for success. I don't even care if anyone has done it before. That's huge. A lot of people need the mental affirmation that someone has done it before. But if you don't need that and you can just jump right to, but I believe in me, then by all means. And I share this sentiment from Rut. I myself believe in me and I believe I am capable of doing it. So thank you, Rut. That's absolutely true. So if the first one is believing there is a way, the second one is having an experimentation mind. For me in high school, I experimented with joining International Baccalaureate. I'm gonna beat this thing called school. I thought I was gonna beat it through International Baccalaureate. 1 year in, I realized this is not for me. I can't get school done. I can't do work. I've got to feed myself and get a job. I've got to sow into my future and learn principles. And I want to get out there and do this thing. I didn't know it was called entrepreneurship at the time. I just knew I wanted to be out in the marketplace doing things. I can't do that with all the homework of International Baccalaureate. So I dropped that experiment. Some people say I failed out of IB. I didn't even think about it that way. It was an experiment. I was like, I didn't want to do this. So I got into honors and I started doing honors. And that was fine. I would still like have accolades in high school, but I'll do honors and just get through it. But now I can at least work a job and start working that way. And honors still had too much homework. And so eventually I started asking myself, how do you win high school? How do you win school? I progressed to by the time I was a senior, I would go up to my teachers and ask, what's the minimum I have to do to get a passing grade? I realized I just had to pass. I realized that I just needed a diploma. Very few people would ask me what my GPA was. I know some of you went to Ivy League. I consciously knew I was not going to go to Ivy League. And I consciously knew that most Ivy League, you got in on your test and your relationships, networking at like real elite levels. And I didn't have any of that going for me. So I realized I wanted to approach this a different way. So I started asking a question. And that is, what's the minimum I have to do to pass? My experimentation started to pay off. My senior year and early years of college. So then I graduated high school, graduated fine. I just did enough to pass. So then after that, I went on to college but what I was able to do was do marketplace things. I held down a job. I launched my first business ventures. I helped the county commission race. I got life experience. I built my network. Meanwhile, my compatriots, my peers were all sitting in their college classes way down by homework. But I had a new method. And that method was, hey, teacher, I know that you're going to take this personally. I know you're going to advise me against it, but what's the minimum I have to do to pass this course? And I would do that every single time. Now, Grant, that's bad behavior. Maybe, but it was a hack. But I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about having the experimentation mind to see what fits you. Number one, you've got to believe there's a way for you to do it. Number two, you've got to have an experimentation mind. This is the bulletproof mix to set you up for how to deal with failure, because you will encounter hiccups. You will encounter failure. So when I adopted this experimentation mind, I also realized another thing. Persistence is not necessarily the right approach. Whoa. The trait of persistence, being able to persist, is huge. Knowing what to persist at is the art. Good morning, Jessica. Good morning, Michelle. Thanks for stopping by, you wonderful people. I hope you are doing fantastic. So here's the thing. Persistence alone will not get you there, because you could persist at the wrong thing, like my friend's author father, who persisted at the wrong thing. Persistence plus experimentation. Now, if my friend's father would have experimented the way Seth Godin experimented in terms of writing submission letters to publishers and to editors and getting feedback and changing the content based on that feedback and getting this book published, maybe then he would have seen the millions, but he persisted at the wrong thing. He didn't have the experimentation mind. So number one is believe that there is a way. Be convinced. And to Rut's point, which I would agree with, you don't have to necessarily see having seen other people do it. You just have to believe in your bone marrow that you are capable of doing it. Some of you might need to know how others have done it. That's number one. And then number two is have an experimentation mind. Persistence doesn't matter if you're not experimenting with your persistence. You can persist at the goal, but you have to have an experimentation mind on the plans. Write your goals in stone and your plans in sand. You got to be nimble. Now, if you have these two things, belief that you can do it, belief in a way, and an experimentation mind, you're ready to move on and actually experiment and encounter your first failure. Here's my thing. Go for failure. Push something so that you're failing at something. Because just as soon as you're failing at it, you're learning about it. I know Brock works with all kinds of code. He's going to set it up on this server and then set up this stack. And then, oh my God, that mix didn't work. And he's got to come up with a new tech stack. Do that as quickly as humanly possible. So here's my number 3 lesson. Once you believe and have a belief mindset, I absolutely can do this. And I believe it. It's not mental assent. And then number 2, once you have an experimentation mind, you're ready to engage in something. And let's say you engage something and then failed. This is what happens next. My friend's father learned the wrong lesson. He learned that people will never understand him and he just needs to keep writing. That was the wrong lesson. Number 3 is this. Do not learn or avoid the wrong lessons. You've heard me use this phrase, but this is a life principle. Learning lessons is not enough. You can learn the wrong lesson. There's a clue here. The wrong lesson, and I said this over drinks last night with Eli and Marissa, the wrong lesson, you know or have a clue it's a wrong lesson if it closes you off to people in the world. Oh man, that preaches. Hear that. You know you're learning the wrong lesson if the lesson or the rule that you're making for yourself is closing you off to people. You have a clue that you might be learning the right lesson if it's opening you up to people. New people, better people. But if you are having a more closed journey, you're learning the wrong lessons. If you're losing everybody around you, I'm not talking about the haters. The haters are going to come and go. I'm talking about people that could be a help to you. So here's the thing. If you find yourself creating hard rules that start with phrases, never again will I, you're learning the wrong lessons. You can learn principles, and that is very important, but it rarely begins with a phrase, I will never again. That's rare. It might happen. It's not never, but it's rare that the real lesson starts with, I will never again. You might. That's maturity. You might do something again. You're just going to do it better. So here's 2 wrong lessons. Never again will I trust or try. It's the wrong lesson. That's the lesson that my friend who put on the workshop and walked away. Never again will I trust or try. Or another wrong lesson is I will never quit trying. Misplaced persistence. These are 2 wrong lessons to learn. I will never quit trying. There's a right moment to quit. There's a right way to quit. But if you start with I will never or never again will I, you're kind of in the wrong neighborhood. And if you're shutting off avenues, you're kind of in the wrong neighborhood. The right lessons are always skill lessons. They're always elevation lessons. So potential lessons are this. These are a few potential right lessons. Number 1, and it usually always starts with this phrase, knowing what I now know. Take that phrase, fold it up like a $20 bill and put it in your pocket. Knowing what I now know. I will try, but this time I will try like this. Knowing what I now know, I will trust people, but I will trust people like this. There's a huge difference here in the lessons you're learning. So again, if you started and made sure that you had a belief mind and you had an experimentation mind, then you engaged in experience to failure, the first thing is not to learn, is to avoid learning the wrong lessons. That's number 3. Number 4, this is my ninja skill. My ninja skill on the planet. Number 4, reframing. I am a master reframer. When I encounter a failure, and here's one. Some of you guys have heard the story how I was kidnapped in India. We can always talk about that in more length over coffee someday. But basically, after I had gotten out of the situation being kidnapped in India, I ended up back on our cruise ship. And I was back on the cruise ship, and I was completely shocked, and I was traumatized. And I would stay in my cabin, and I stayed in my cabin for a day and a half, 2 days. I would wander around the ship, but I didn't leave the ship. And about day and a half in, 2 days in, I started really getting bothered that I was retreating from the world. The lesson I was learning was not to trust. The lesson I was learning was to keep people out. And I hated how that felt. I'm sure you felt the same way. So I sat on the boat and I said, oh, I'm not going to learn the wrong lesson here. Oh man, there's no way I'm going to let this one experience taint and paint my entire trip to India. So in spite of some fear and anxiety I had, I immediately walked down the gangplank, exited the ship, and I just walked as far as I could into Madras or Chennai. I just walked as far as I could. And then the children come up and ask for money. And I was at first like, no way, get away from me, because I was still a little shook. But I decided, you know what? I don't want to be closed off. I don't want my heart closed off. I know that giving away money in the developing world doesn't always help people. I know sometimes it's disempowering, but I had to learn a different lesson in that moment. And that moment was to give no matter how closed I was feeling. I wanted to open up my heart. So I started pulling money out. Then I went to the ATM and I pulled more money out. And I was just giving money away until I shook off this specter of dislike and distrust. And I reframed this loss, this traumatic experience of being kidnapped. I then, after I gave all my money away and I was walking back to the ship, I told myself, this was not a story. This is not a story about being kidnapped and escaping. This is a story about a difficult experience that could have closed me off, but you can use these things to leverage you to open your heart even more than you were before. I reframed a failure into a success. Marissa always says to me, you always spin things to make yourself look good. Yes, I do. Not to overlook my failures. I have no problem telling you where I failed, but we will not spend a long time there. I will tell you how I became better because of it. I will tell you how this was put into my life to make me better. I will tell you how that one partnership we did, that one partnership fell apart and we got a little manipulated on the way out and we spent a ton of money and lost a couple grand on it. But I will tell you how I learned to be a better partner. Sean Lyons says, you never fail until you give up. Albert Einstein, we only find 1,000 ways it hasn't worked yet. Or in Edison's case, 10,000 ways that the light bulb couldn't work. There are no failures. Oh man, I've got to look at Brock's here. Brock's got a great statement. He said, I built an app 5 years ago, started to become fairly popular on a small scale, but large enough that I had to figure out a more scalable strategy. Didn't have a great answer. It looked like it was going to implode. Had some opportunities for VC. Oh man, let's look here. So I had to ask himself, am I going to beat these odds? Or more precisely, am I special about statistics? And the answer was no. So I closed up the app since I didn't know how to bootstrap it. Funny enough, the thing that virtually all software startups that have been successful with VC is that they didn't need it. They bootstrapped and were profitable from day one. And he can do that now. He took what could have been perceived as a failure. You had your shot. You had your shot at an app. You had your shot at venture capital. You totally screwed the pooch and lost your opportunity. And Brock's story is I learned the value of bootstrapping. And now everything I build is debt-free and we're going to bootstrap it. You're allowed to reframe stories that could be perceived as failure. You are allowed to shift those and make yourself look better. The truth is you're making yourself feel better about your story. You have an imperative to reframe the world. This world is completely subjective. If we were to really just be gut level honest for a second on a Friday morning because we love each other and we can talk openly to each other, we are beasts in clothing with rocket ships. We're just another animal species on this planet, and there is no empirical underlying philosophy. We might have a divine, otherworldly, psychic connection to one another. There might be something we call a calling, and that might be quantum, and it might be just neurochemicals. I don't know. But this world is a blank slate, is my point. And what one person calls failure is not empirically true. So when you reframe it, you're not lying to yourself. You're not lying to anyone else. You're choosing to craft tomorrow when you reframe. You're choosing to craft your day. And more than anything, you're crafting what people know as you. You're crafting your story. That leads me to number 5. If number 4 is reframe, unabashed, boldly reframe, as Brock did for his app story. And maybe that was just integrated from the get-go. Maybe he needed 0 reframing. But you are allowed to reframe. If you guys are going through highs and lows, going through separations, going through raising kids that might not always appreciate you, going through challenges, going through losing employees, going through losing market opportunities, come on. Reframe this thing. And at your bone, you're not lying to yourself. Reframe on how this thing is setting you up for success. I'm a master reframer because I do it almost immediately. You can become better at this. And here's the thing, the last thing I want to say to you about my principles for turning every failure into victory. Number 5, give it space for the story. Reframing happens here, but it's codified here. It's called an oral tradition for a reason. It's called owning. What is that called? We were just watching on West Wing. Owning the story or owning the script. Owning what the overarching story being told about what has happened. So you could say me and Marissa failed in the Dominican Republic. After we lost our relationship with our co-founders to our Haiti organization, you could have said we failed there, but we reframed, we pivoted, and we invested and put ourselves in the Dominican Republic. And our story at that time was, we're going to live here. I'm going to do teaching English as a second language. I'm going to do humanitarian aid and development and coaching. Marissa's going to do scuba dive instructing. And we threw money at this. We threw over 10 grand at just the move alone and getting Marissa set up and getting our living set up. And then I was going to start writing and infopreneuring, and I failed. I went through the worst depression that I have as an adult. I was completely disconnected from English speakers. I was challenged every day, and then I couldn't write, and I didn't have good writing systems. And Marissa had this life that was just flourishing, and I was jealous of that and struggled with that. But I slowly was making headway at that, but I was also watching our dollars slip away. But Marissa was graduating. We probably could have lived on Marissa's scuba dive income, but then she and I were kind of fighting and not always aligned. And we have a photo for my birthday, and it was a beautiful birthday on a remote island where we lived in an Italian expats restaurant, eating garlic aioli and watching the bats fly in and out of the little glinting sea. And I was just depressed. It's a great photo, and I love this photo because it reminds me of what it was. Then Marissa started to get a little sick as she was literally taking her test for scuba dive instruction, and she was feeling under the weather. I told her to run it off. We took a bus ride and moved to the north of the island because that was the plan, and we set up shop there, and we realized Marissa had dengue fever. And this was the straw that broke the camel's back, and we returned to the United States. So a few months later, we got on an airplane. We returned to the United States, and we had a 14-hour bus ride from Miami to Savannah, where her mother would pick us up. And then we spent 2 solid weeks, maybe 3 solid weeks in Hilton Head Island. Here's the thing. What did we do for those 3 weeks? We rewrote our story. We nursed our little hearts, our little broken hearts and our little broken egos. And we said, is this a failure? Well, we had to plan what we were going to do next and where we were going to go. And Lakeland was the obvious option, but we had to plan what was the story. We wanted to own the story. So we took that 3 weeks and we decided, what are we going to say about this trip? And what are we going to say on how it shaped us? See, number 5 is when you experience a setback, you need to set aside time to A, grieve, and B, guard your mouth, because you could immediately start getting motor mouth and telling the wrong story. You need to take a pause, withdraw, take a vacation, go to the beach, rent an Airbnb, go do something else, and take time with the story. What is the story here? What did I learn? Who did I become? How am I going to reframe this? And more important than just a reframe, which could be misconstrued as a lie, what is going to be the new foundation from which I learn my lessons? Give space for the story. Number 1, do not start unless you absolutely believe there is a way. That's foundational. Number 2, adopt an experimentation mind. These are not successes or failures. This is a life of progressive experiments. Buckminster Fuller said he called himself guinea pig B, meaning he wasn't even the most important thing in the world, and his entire life was an experiment. Me and Marissa, our entire life has been an experiment in adventure and success and fulfillment. That's why we've lived abroad and taken risks and built businesses and hired people and keep stepping up to the plate, because our life is an experiment. Number 3, avoid the wrong lessons. These wrong lessons begin with never will I again. I'm never going to do X ever again. And they begin to close you off from the world. These are the wrong lessons. Learn the right lessons. How can I be better? How can I step up to the plate? How can I improve my swing? How can I speak better and hire better and build better relationships and set better expectations? Learn the right lessons. Number 4, unabashedly reframe this story to yourself here. Man, this isn't a setback. This is setting me up for something better, and I have to know what it is. And number 5, give space to the story. Listen, you know I believe in what you are doing, even if I don't know what you're doing. I believe in you because I believe you're human, and I believe you're superhuman because you're human. I know that's insanity, but I believe you're going to do great things today. Please let me know how we can serve you. Visit the Facebook Goals and Gratitude group. I might need to change and add an E to my URL, according to Brock. If you need other support, visit us at stateofthespark.com. We're going to continue to be adding more and more resources to that. But whatever you do today, remember the mission. Igniting lives of explosive significance, starting with your own. Have a great day.